Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. Regional, territorial, unitary, wards and boards. Local government in New Zealand is made up of 78 different councils that make the decisions we encounter daily. The roads, air, rubbish, waters, environment, it's all local government. So why has central government announced a need for change? And why has the Prime Minister himself implored councils to, quote, stop doing dumb stuff? Today on the front page, Victoria University of Wellington Associate Professor in Politics, Lara Greaves, is with us to take us through what this all means and what the future could hold for our local councils. So, Lara, let's talk first about the rates cap. So that's the annual rates increases would be limited to between 2 and 4%. Consultation has begun and they want the laws passed through the House by the start of 2027, in place by 2029. Now, on one hand, yay, lower rates, right? The days of double digits would be over, weather permitting, of course. There will be exemptions for things like natural disasters and things like that. But on the other hand, there are concerns that the cuts will mean cuts to basic services. And I wanted to ask you, is it a myth that councils spend a lot of money on stupid stuff?
It's a hard one, right? Because on a day-to-day basis, everyone's feeling the pinch. Everyone's going to the supermarket and it's so expensive, and people are kind of like living their lives trying to pay for petrol, rent and all of those bits and pieces. So if they are a homeowner and they get that rates bill and they hear about those rates increases, they kind of feel, I don't know, mixed feelings around, well, why can't the council manage money better? I have to manage my budget better. And that's what a lot of people are feeling on a day-to-day basis. And of course, if you own a house, there's that argument that you would pass those rates increases on to renters as well. So it affects kind of everyone. And a lot of people are quite concerned about, those double-digit rates increases, like you said. However, on a day-to-day basis, the council does fund a lot of good things that kind of make our communities, a lot of good things that we use a lot. I mean, as an academic, I use the, Auckland libraries a lot, but that's one thing. But people go and get books for their kids. There's the kind of rubbish delivery, kind of pretty important. If you've ever been to a country that doesn't have those sorts of services, very important, something we need. There's also the things around the water infrastructure. Wellington's problems have really highlighted that. Different things around transport and roading and just all sorts of bits and pieces there that we don't really think about on a day-to-day basis, but we just kind of take advantage of in living our lives. So this then becomes a bit of an issue around, okay, so if council has less money to be able to fund these things and they have to prioritize different bits and pieces, it may mean that we end up in more of, say, like a user pay system or something along those lines, then that becomes a bit of a cultural issue for New Zealanders who are used to, say, free or cheap public pools or library services and bits and pieces like that. Ultimately, the majority of polling shows, and this was reported on the Herald, that 75% of people support these rates caps, the increased caps. A lot of those questions comes down to how you ask the question, though. That's what a lot of political science literature says. So if I say, do you want lower taxes or lower rates? People go, yes. But then if I say, if that means that you have to pay every time you go to the library or have to pay for services through some other kind of levy or tax, would you want that? People go, no. So it's one of those kind of hard political issues that people have a gut reaction on, but when they look into it more, their opinion might change.
Yeah, I see that both Labor and the Greens oppose the rates cap, and that's despite that polling, like you said, 75% of Kiwis support it. But again, the questioning around that, we'd have to look at that. But I imagine that this would be a move that will bode well for National come election time, because they've not only now got your soft on crime, but they've got the you want people to pay more rates or something. You know what I mean? So is this quite a clever tactic going into 2026?
Well, we have to think about what the big issues are for people, right? And so the cost of living or the economy or something around affordability day to day is a big issue for New Zealanders and a big issue in polling. That's what they consistently say. So this kind of would, on the surface, look like it would help to alleviate that for people. So that might be a big tick for voters. But kind of overall, we don't see in a lot of the sort of voting data and a lot of the political science literature that people are local government voters. Like that's not a big issue high up on their thing, but it might be that this kind of makes it feel to people like that costs will come under control. So it gives them that greater sense of control and kind of hope for the future around this. Again, whether that's an actual economic reality or fact or not, that's kind of will come out on the wash, so to speak. So that, I guess, part of that broader conversation of does it look like that National will be tough on spending, like they're tough on crime. It's part of that broader package of ideas that they'll be going to the election on. And yeah, I'm think that will contribute to that discourse and bits and pieces. We know that people generally, if you look at the groups in society that people don't tend to support on a day-to-day basis, it is the council and other politicians are normally not high up the kind of trust rankings. So I think that local government and local government spending is a kind of sensible, rhetorical, discursive kind of target or group that you could talk about in negative ways that won't get a lot of pushback, but will help to kind of contribute to this overall package of policies or brand that as a party, National will get tough on things like spending and wasteful spending.
Are you frustrated with the performance of your local council? Well, the good news is that change is coming and the government is acting. We think local government has lost its way, it's lost its social licence. This is all about stripping cost out of the system, reducing duplication, making it more organisationally efficient and ultimately getting better value for money for ratepayers. But here's the take-home point. Something's got to change because the status quo is not acceptable.
Yeah, so at the same time, RMA Reform Minister Chris Bishop has described some potential changes to local authorities. He says it's the most significant changes potentially to local government since 1989. Tell me about these ideas. What ideas does he have for local government?
Well, what we've seen over the years is that, local government was established and we've just kind of gone along, all through the 80s, 90s, 2000s and so on. So this kind of local government structure was created. It's evolved in little bits and pieces over time, but there haven't been that substantive structural change. I have to say over the past sort of 15 years, my career in politics, political science, is that we often do wring our hands over local government and kind of go, oh, well, something needs to change. There was a local government review in 2023 that had a bunch of recommendations. Every time we have local government elections, I spend a lot of time talking about turnout being low and the issues around turnout. So we know that structurally there are some issues with local government. And one of the kind of debates in terms of local government is it too big? Is it too complicated? Is it too bureaucratic? And if you're of a party on the right, you're generally going to say yes. The Taxpayers Union have been campaigning for, the reduced rates, the less spending, a less bureaucratic structure. ACT, National tend to campaign on this as well and tend to kind of raise these ideas. It was the ACT party that amalgamated, they take credit for amalgamating the Auckland councils as well. You remember there were all the different kind of North Shore Council, all of those got amalgamated in 2010 as a result of some of their work. So this has been a long kind of running issue of can you kind of cut, chop and change something in local government. The government has proposed removing the 11 regional councils and instead kind of creating these committees to oversee that work. A lot of the regional council work is around resource management, like land use planning and environmental water type matters, all of those bits and pieces. So basically trying to make changes to that system to remove that bureaucracy. What we have seen when local government is changed, for example, around the super city, is that you don't end up those roles still have to exist in some way. There's still often other people that come in to do the job. You couldn't drop a lot of those functions. And the other thing within that, we're still to kind of see is what happens around te tiriti and kapu and iwi and local government in that space. So yeah, it's really overall an argument of, do you want to kind of maintain the current level of government in the structure, or do you want to cut some of it away? And we've seen this government's general policy agenda has been to reduce bits and pieces in the sort of policy, public sector, governance structures. And so this kind of smaller government reducing some of the levels of local council makes a lot of sense in terms of their overall direction as a government.
Yeah, because a lot of people say would be able to say the name of the mayor, right, where they live. A smaller group would probably know their local councillor, maybe, because 40% turnout for local elections. A few people out there must know their local councillors, but you'd be hard pressed to know who your regional councillor is or who the CEO of your regional council is or something, for example. Hey, so there does seem to be too many cooks in the kitchen in that respect. But you're saying if somebody's looking after, I don't know, like ECAN, for example, Environment Canterbury, they look out for all of the wetlands, and they've got, these massive projects about natural resources and things like that. That'll just have to be amalgamated into the Christchurch City Council, presumably.
Yeah, so that's kind of the broad direction of travel there. I think that you don't really think about local government until something goes wrong, or like you need to think about local government. And I would say different stakeholder groups think about local government a lot more. Say you're in a sports club and you're on the committee of that sports club or doing some kind of volunteer work. I think that that's where you would think more about your local government and the functions there. Or if they do something that really irks you, really annoys you, I think that that's where you think about local government, because they sure do have low levels of voter turnout, and generally there's a low level of awareness or knowledge about what they do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So there's that problem, and that problem has been one that has been persisting for decades, as to what exactly to do structurally about local government to make sure it's as efficient as possible and that it's actually fulfilling the needs of the community, and the community cares enough to turn out to vote. Do these reforms kind of help to fix some of that? Potentially. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, if it goes into gets in and gets put in place in time and with the election and bits and pieces there. But I mean, I think a big frustration for some of us who've kind of taught on these issues is, the layers of complication and the lack of kind of clarity of what it is that everyone does on a day-to-day basis, and it's still opaque for students who don't know that, let alone you kind of Joe on the street kind of person, the average voter. So it's a big problem, and I'm not sure that the reforms that have been proposed will fix that big, broad structural problem, but it's like someone's doing something finally in local government, which hasn't always been the case.
Yeah, like even the fact that we're starting to kind of talk about it again, I suppose. But do you reckon that those suggestions for reform are actually a bit light? Like, could we see, for example, an amalgamation of councils into one, like the Auckland Super City? So I was looking at this map of all of the regional councils and, the district councils, the local boards, etc. Waikato region has like 10 district councils or something like that. And I remember we were down there speaking to the Waitomo mayor, and he mentioned to us that maybe there could be some amalgamation of those smaller councils, especially as well, because some of those councillors are only paid, and I say only paid 20 to 50k a year, compared to the bigger councils like Auckland. You've got over 100k a year for some of those councillors. So is it time to have a much bigger, harsher conversation than the one we're even having now?
Well, what I would say is that there are various reviews that I've seen haven't necessarily proposed a structure. They propose principles or ideas or values, but not necessarily a structure of let's sort it out. This is where I would like to see something like some citizens' assemblies or some deliberative democracy, where you randomly select 100 people from whatever town, bring them together and get them to discuss these issues and try to figure out what actually a good kind of system with a good mandate looks like in local government. I mean, look, to do any of that would have meant investing time, resources, reporting, another review, a bunch of experts, and it would just be another one. And then ultimately, would that report just end up filed on some minister's desk? But I think that ultimately a lot of the local government structures were set up more than a century ago, the reality.
Yeah.
The way I'm thinking back to the borough councils and all of those bits and pieces. And it's like governments, I think, generally are not making those big structural changes in a lot of areas of our lives, right? Of the economy and bits and pieces. So I don't necessarily think that we can expect some government to actually do it, actually sit down and go, how is this going to be organised? What is an efficient, fair way? In the way that, say, electorates are organised, where you have, say, 70,000 people per electorate, and that's an electorate, that's a geographic area, and it's drawn a certain way. So I think ultimately, it would be great if someone did just like go, okay, we're going to take a global view. We're going to sort this out once and sort this out with some kind of cross-party mandate and get it sorted into the future. That would be the ideal. But I can't see us doing that the way that our current politics are set out. I mean, there would be a great service if Labour and National could get together and sort it out for the decades to come. But instead, we will have all of these kind of, I'm sure, these kind of amusing spending decisions and these like local government situations into the future. And I imagine that in 10 years' time, we'll probably be sitting here having the same conversation.
Stop doing dumb stuff. Did you need to spend $2 million here in Wellington on a public toilet block? No, they didn't. Do you need to spend money on judder bars and rather than actually fixing roads? So I mean, this is going to force when you've got scarcity, as we find the central government having inherited the mess we got from the Labor government, when you're actually paying a $9 billion interest bill, and that's 4 or 5 hospitals you can't build each and every year because of that interest bill. Thank you, Labor.
Yeah, and even the rhetoric between central government and local government as well is pretty harsh. Hey, like you've got the Prime Minister out here saying, councils need to stop doing dumb stuff. It's like, well, that doesn't instill too much hope and too much pride in our local government, does it? And I mean, you've also got situations around the country as well where the government has had to step in and bring in a commissioner, etc. But I kind of guess, like, if we fixed, quote unquote, the situation as a whole, you would have better people coming forward to become a local councillor. You'd have better ideas around the table and more transparency and the public actually knowing what all of these people do, thus more people going out to vote. Because people probably don't realise, as soon as you step outside of your door, you've encountered probably like 5 things that local government has done for you.
Yeah. Generally, it's a big issue, and I'm looking forward to seeing what changes, the changes to the NCEA and the civics and citizenship type curriculum changes. Hopefully that builds in some kind of local government educational knowledge into that. The other thing, of course, is that for local government, a lot of the people aren't particularly well paid. It's like a part-time job for them. And of course, we've seen that broader context of like violent threats towards women running in local government. So if you kind of combine all of these contexts together, you can see why someone wouldn't want to stand for local government. The first, that like not knowledge about what they do, feeling undervalued by central government, and then this kind of context and bits and pieces that we're hearing. People not even turning up to vote. So, I mean, if you set up a system like that, who are you going to get that's going to run, and who are you going to get around those decision-making and governance tables? So I think it's just one of those things where we keep wringing our hands thinking, what could it look like? What could a good future model be? We'd also need to figure out what to do with Māori representation, because one of the big things in the last year that's been in the media around local government, of course, has been the Māori wards referendums. So there's a few issues to sort out there. But again, it's like, I feel like we spend so much of our time kind of going, well, what's wrong with local government? And there's actually some real positive things and some great things that they do in the community, and things that, like, if you are someone who loves your community and wants to get involved, I would hope people would go forward and, really see change. I think a lot of the local government politicians I've heard from find it rewarding to see things on the ground actually change in their communities. And it's a really kind of positive thing where like local people make local decisions, but it's set against all of this kind of negativity and the turnout and the Prime Minister's comments. So it's probably one of those what we would call wicked problems of like local government that we have to continually like move back towards trying to figure out something to do with it. And hopefully someone will sort it at some point.
Thanks for joining us, Lara.
Kia ora, thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.